Hello everyone. So in this video session, we're going to take a look at a software pattern which is known as the observer pattern. So the name that we probably have heard this pattern is like the observer pattern. There are many really cool resources out there for reading and learning about the observer pattern. It's a general software pattern. It's not related only to JavaScript. Actually, it was something that came about from a book called Design Patterns, and it was mostly about object-oriented programming languages like Java or C# or C++. But this pattern, along with other software patterns, are used across all sorts of like different programming languages. So they're not restricted to just Java or some language, and they're not even restricted to object-oriented languages. A lot of these patterns can be used in other programming paradigms and other languages as well, maybe non-object-oriented languages. So this is the observer pattern. It's really nice and useful pattern, and it's used across many different JavaScript frameworks and libraries. For example, React uses a variation of the observer pattern, and many other front-end frameworks and libraries are also making use of the observer pattern. Another name that this pattern is known is the publisher subscriber, or short for pub/sub. So basically, they're kind of like the same. I will be using the pub/sub pattern name because I think the name explains the concept. It's kind of like a self-descriptive and better name, so I will stick with the pub/sub, short for publisher subscriber. But basically, they're pretty much the same. Now, before going into the pattern, I will start with a problem. So, what kind of problem we get while designing software, and especially software systems, and how certain patterns like the observer pattern can help us solve these problems. So I will start, and in this example, we will try to use or kind of like build and test this pattern around a very simple email client. So when we have a software system, let me start by. So software system meaning a website and web application, anything that you create and is composed of one or more parts. Usually our software is not just one thing, a function or a class or a simple thing. Most of them is like many things. We might call them components or modules or function or classes. So we put a lot of things together, and all these things make up a software system, a software application, a website, and they interact with each other. And at the end of the day, all of them together produce some kind of like output or accomplish a goal. So the simplest thing that we can start with is, let's say that we have like a simple application, front-end application that displays, let's say, an email message. So we have this kind of like a UI element. We create some kind of nice fancy HTML, CSS box or widget, and then we want to display an email message. So we retrieve an email from our email server. So we need some kind of like endpoint or server, and then our simple, let's say, widget will connect, make a fetch request, or connect in some way with the email server, get the data, and then present this email to the user. So up to this point, this is a very simple architecture, a UI element, grabbing some data and showing something to the user. Of course, most of the times our applications are a little bit more advanced and more complicated than this. So apart from like this main, let's say, I'll call it, let's say, email viewer component, we usually when we work with an email client, we will be needing a list of emails. So not just seeing one email at a time, So we have email, let's say A, email B, email C, email D. So we have something like this in almost all email clients. Sorry, let me make B. We see a list of our available emails for reading. And we have like a list at the left, at the right, and then we can pick one of these emails. We can open it, we can click it, and then we can view it in the main area. Then we pick another email, and then we see another message. So suddenly, just by introducing, let's call this like an email list component. So this is, let's say, the email viewer, and this is some kind of like an email list component. Just maybe put it here. So just by introducing a new feature, which allows the user to see some of the other email messages that are available for downloading and reading, we have made one step forward to making our software system a little bit more complex. Why is that? Because right now we have like a list of email, let's say, buttons or subcomponents in here that must in some way be connected with this main email viewer. If we click on one of these, we have to notify each of these components should notify the email viewer that, hey, you should now display email A. If the user clicks here, they have to display email B. So right here, we now have more than one component in our system, more than one part, and we have this dependency kind of like relationship where we have the email viewer now depends on the email server data and also on some kind of data or action or notification that we'll receive from these components so that it knows to display a new email, re-render and show something else. And of course, because we also need to provide this list of emails to the email list, we also need to get the email server, connect the email list component with the email server, load, I don't know, the 10 most recent emails or something like that, or maybe all of them, and then show them here. So this is how a new feature is actually introducing some complexity into our system. So we went from like a very simple, like let's say, state of our system or a very simple version of our system, and then just by adding one additional widget here, we have introduced quite some complexity into our system. Let me put another component. So apart from these two components, in an email client usually has some kind of like a header or maybe a sidebar. Let me put this here. That shows us how many unread messages we have. So usually we have this, let's say, indicator here. So when we load the emails, we see, let's say the first time we see all of them as unread. They're in unread status. We haven't read them. And once we click and open them, they either become automatically, they switch to read mode. So it seems that we opened the email. So now we have read the message, or there's a button that says, let's say, sometimes we see this as mark as read, let's say. So we have read this message, and we know that this, once we click it, we will mark this as read, and then this will become, let's say, it will change the styling, and this will become 1. Okay, so very basic email functionality, and it's just like, I would say 1% of what the email clients support these days. So a third component added to our system, along with some interactions and some relations, introduces yet one more level of complexity. So first of all, since this component needs to show the number of unread messages, then these guys here that actually, let's say, hold this information, whether they're read or unread status, they have in some way to communicate with this component and update the value. So if this shows a number like 10, if one of these guys turns from like unread to read, it has to notify this component and say, hey, reduce the number of unread messages to 9 because I just went from unread status to read. Maybe if this component we introduce a button, this should also in some way notify like this component, because if I click this email and I switch to read mode, this component should be notified. It should know that something changed related with a number of unread messages. And then probably I need to like communicate with one of these guys if this is like the button that I want to be placed here. And it has to communicate, it has to connect with this other like email list elements and notify them that, some part of the state of our application has changed, then one email has gone from unread mode to read. Now, depending on the implementation, depending on the features, depending on how you decide to build this, you will come across this situation where you have a system which has become way too complex to deal with. It's a complex system, a nice, let me go to Wikipedia, complexity system. There's a nice complexity. So through this series of like interconnections, we have now a complex system in our hands, and a complex system is the web developers or the software developers' worst nightmare, because as the Wikipedia article mentions here, so complexity characterizes the behavior of a system. In this case, we're just interested in software systems whose components interact in multiple ways and follow local rules, leading to non-linearity. You see this kind of like arrows pointing all through different like components, randomness, and some other like properties that come out of this complexity. So let me see. There's, I think, another Wikipedia article on complex system. I think this one is much better. So the key point here is that the complex system, just like the one we introduced, is a system composed of many components which may interact with each other. So this is how a complex system arises. Many components that are interacting with each other. If these components were not interacting, were not connected with each other, they didn't care about each other, we wouldn't have a complex system. It might be a system with many components, but we wouldn't be calling this system a complex, or we wouldn't be talking about a complex system. The complexity arises when we have multiple components, many components, and we have this interaction, this intercommunication, this these arrows going from one point to another. Complex systems are the theory of systems, and complex systems is not just about software, it's about biological systems and other systems as well, but we're interested in software systems. So that's how a complex system is defined. And here, there's also another passage that I'm going to read. So the behavior of a complex system is intrinsically difficult to model, or in our case, it is difficult to work with and maintain and update due to the dependencies, competitions, relationships, and other types of interactions between their parts or between a given system and its environment. So not only we have like this system that is kind of like gone into a complex state, and we have like all these components talking with each other and having to notify each other, but we also have a complex connection with the environment. Perhaps we might need to, we might introduce, let's say, another widget. I don't know what this would be, maybe total messages. And now we have to also create another connection with the environment, with something outside of our system. So the complexity arises also from this kind of like connections and dependencies with something like a server or a service that lives outside our system. And we have to keep track of which components are connected and which components are dependent and which components need to interact or receive information or send information to this email server. So this is like a complex system. Um, and yeah, I will go as far as this point. And I don't think, yeah, that's from like the formal definition. So this is the problem, okay, and this is a problem that we tend like to come across many times, if not every single case of a project that we're working with. So how do we deal with software complexity and system complexity in software? Basically, we just have to think and try different solutions. And usually people and developers and software engineers have come across different solutions just by working and experimenting and trying things out. And when in a specific situation, for example, in a situation like this, people come across a solution that works, then we have what it's called a software or design pattern. So we have a solution, a solution to a complex system. Um, if we try this again and again, it seems to be working with similar systems or similar contexts. A solution, so these solutions can become a pattern. So if we find a solution to kind of like minimize the complexity and help us work with this system, then we can put this solution aside. And the next time we come across something that looks similar like this application, for example, uh, almost all front-end applications will have this kind of complexity because all modern user interfaces have a lot of like widgets and a lot of user interface elements, and they all connect with each other, right? Even your Twitter or your Facebook or your Instagram account, they have these bubbles with the new messages, then you have the messages, then you have the messages that you like, the messages that you follow. So all these components are constantly communicating and need to be connected with each other. You delete a message, you delete a tweet, you retweet, there's something changes in other parts of your application. So usually we tend to come across this situation a lot in front-end development. So if at some point we had a solution that worked, we try it in another similar context and it works, then we have ourselves a pattern. This means that we find ways to deal with these situations without having to like once again start thinking about a new novel way to solve the situation. So this is where different patterns exist in software, and we come across them. Like we find them in books, we find them in lectures. We have to learn about some or all of them. And then when we come across a situation that looks that it needs one of these patterns, we will try and implement a pattern. So in this case, we're going to be using the observer pattern to try and solve this situation. Now, before moving on to talk a little bit about the pattern and then implement a simple application, let me talk a little bit about why this is a problem. Someone will say, okay, these will take some time to like compose the components together, connect them, make sure that they work correctly, and we see the behavior, the expected behavior. And at some point, you will probably have a hard time, like, setting this up, this complex system. But at some point, you will probably successfully succeed to implement, and you have something working. But the problem with software is that things keeps changing. So even if you come across this application and you you create and you develop and you implement like the first version, there will be a new feature down the road or many features, and you will need to make a lot of changes. So what's the problem with these constantly changing systems? So if we have this, let's say, system with all these interconnected parts, if at some point someone asks us, for example, like to delete this component, to get rid of this component, so let me, and then move this along with the, let's say, with so 4 and unread 2. So if you just need to remove a component and then move some functionality into another component, you have to think about what components are dependent on this component. For example, we know that this guy here should break its connection or should reconnect with this component. So just by removing this component, this guy here will not be working. All these components will be using, maybe the application is not breaking, but they will be um, um, having these unnecessary connections to nowhere, right? So we have to go and fix the email list widget. So we have to also take care of these guys. And then probably also find some other connections. So just by removing a part of the system or moving it elsewhere or changing it, we have to constantly think about all these combinations. How many connections are there? Are there outwards, inwards connections? How should we rewire them? If this changes and it becomes like a different thing, that let's say we change the view and there's some other thing. Let's say we have like we have a new thing that's called, let me start character. We have this favorite or starred. Uh, like in most applications, you can like star or make a favorite or make something that's important, and then you can, let's say I want these emails to be like somewhere on my list. They are important, I have read them, so they're in unread mode, or maybe they're also in read or unread mode, but I need to keep a list of favorite emails. So now you have a new feature, a new challenge. You have to find some other, like you have to create another widget here, which is called, let's say, favorites or starred. So you now have another set of connections going from this guy here with this, all of them have to connect and notify this component. So you can see how this can be become a really, really big problem. Changing things, moving things, updating things, removing things, and having to think about their interdependencies and connections will absolutely make your life really hard, and you will eventually introduce bugs. So you might think and take care and predict of the changes, some of the changes that you need to do, and some of the things that should happen, and maybe your application will work as expected at first, but then you will see that you will realize that at some point you forgot to think of like this intricate relationship that goes from this one, let's say, to, I don't know, this one or something like that, and there will be a bug introduced. So maybe all this thing is working fine, but this remains, let's say, shows the wrong number of start messages. Okay. And just to be clear that this is not just a scenario, like an extreme scenario. At this point, if you go on GitHub and you check on the issues that you have on GitHub, there's an indicator at the top right that says you have new messages. So if I go to GitHub, I will see 3 new messages. If I go and clear my messages, the bubble will still say I have unread messages. So at this point, there's a bug on GitHub, which is exactly in this context, that has a list of issues that you can read and you can clear. And then there's another widget on the top right that doesn't get notified accordingly, and it stays in read mode or unread mode when you have like cleared your issues. So even for big projects and big companies like Microsoft, we see these bugs on these complex systems and these really, really complicated front-end applications. There was also a bug, the same bug in Facebook, and this was mainly the reason why Facebook decided to move fast towards React and Flax architecture. There was also a similar bug where the unread messages on your Messenger app were showing, a wrong number when you had like just cleared all of your messages. So this can happen even in big projects as well. Okay, so we have this problem. Let's see the pattern, and then let's implement the pattern and see how it solves our problem. So the observer pattern is, let me go here. So we have like the observer pattern, and we have like let's say it has multiple names, but we either see it as the observer pattern or the publish subscribe pattern, short, pub sub for short. Okay, so if you see this, it's just a shorthand for. And just to move these two like names to get like closer to each other, they both work. So they both work with this pair of something that publishes and something that subscribes, or something that, let's say, emits some data, creates data, and some other part of your system that actually like listens to these changes, and grabs the data changes. So in the observer pattern, we have also a pair. We have, let me see, observable, observer. So we have, in both cases, in both naming, these pairs. So we have something that we observe, and we have something that observes this thing. We have something that publishes, something that creates data and publishes this data, and then we have other things that subscribe. So here's the basic idea. We have the observable or publisher here. Okay, and this guy here is capable of working with data, and then sharing this data with other components of the system that rely on this data. So we have a thing that creates and manages and updates data. So this is kind of like the data manager, if you will. Okay. And then we have some other components that take a different role. These times, these are observers. They observe the changes to the data, or they are subscribers. So they just subscribe or observe the data from the publisher. And we have one or many observers or subscribers. And what they do is that first they subscribe to the publisher. They say, hey, I'm really interested about what you have to say to me. I'm really interested about the data that you publish or you create. So the first step is to subscribe. Okay, subscribe here. And then we'll talk about some real life scenarios where we see this publish subscribe model used in the real world. So the first thing is you have some parties that are interested in the data that this publisher or observable or main entity creates. And then when this data changes, so when we have like let's say we have a simple data, we have counter 0. Okay, this is the simplest thing I can think of right now. The only data this publisher is. No. So it starts with this counter, and then once we have the subscribers, and this value changes to another value, the observable or publisher immediately notifies the subscribers and about the changes in the data. So then it goes to all these guys here, and it says, "Hey, I have some news for you. Counter went from 0 to 1." Something that I forgot to mention is that sometimes, not always, but sometimes when we subscribe to a system, to a publisher, we immediately get the current state of the system. So this guy here displays 0. When it subscribes, it gets the first state of the data. And when after, let's say, a few seconds, the data goes from from 0 to 1, then these will get a notification from the publisher, and they will immediately change from 0 to 1. So this is basically the pub sub pattern in a nutshell. I will give you two examples from real world just to see how this was inspired by the real world. So first of all, you have, and hence the name, you have the magazine publisher. So you have a publishing company that publishes a magazine every month. So Forbes magazine, The Economist, whatever. So they publish this magazine, and what they do is they reach out to the people that are interested, and they say, "Do you want to subscribe to our monthly magazine?" People subscribe. They start sending their fees, their payments, and then the publisher has a list of, let's say, 1,000 subscribers. So when they get a new issue, when the new Forbes, let's say, magazine comes out, they see the list of subscribers. This is important. And then they send out the magazine to all the subscribers. Now, the cool thing about this publish subscribe model is that the publisher doesn't really care about who joins or how many join or how many leave or how many new. It only needs to know to know the list of current subscribers. Subscribers can unsubscribe or can subscribe at any point. They can be 1,000, they can be 10, they can be 10,000. So the publisher is only interested in keeping a list of the current subscribers, and then when it publishes the magazine, it sends this magazine to their addresses. In our case, in our software system, this will be done, of course, programmatically. So that's one publish subscribe or publisher subscriber model in real life. Another example, you might also think it as observable observer. So you have like something like a streaming server. So you have Netflix that is streaming these movies, this series, and you have people subscribing to its service. And then when they subscribe, then Netflix streams the video data to their computers. So once again, you have something that can be observed, the observable. This can be like a series of videos. And you have the observers, which are just accounts and users of the Netflix client that will be fetching the streaming data from the Netflix publisher or observable, and they will be seeing things on their machines, on their screens. At any point, new subscribers will be subscribing, and some of them will be unsubscribing. So if someone from here, decides to unsubscribe, then the problem is not a big deal. The publisher will keep publishing and sending these messages to the other ones. So this makes this very scalable, and also it keeps like this kind of like top-down approach of the data flowing. So there's a central authority, a central, let's say, entity that manages some data, and then it just sends this data outwards, like to the currently subscribed components, and then it's the responsibility of the components of the subscribers to do something with that data. Another important key point is that the observable doesn't care what these subscribers will do with the data. They can show the number on the screen. They can use that number to add it to another number. They can use this number to throw a dice or play a game. The publisher doesn't really care what the data that they will be sending to the subscribers is done over at that point. This guy maybe can display the number one. This can, I don't know, add two to it and then show three. And maybe this will just create three, let's say, shapes out of this number. So, okay, one, okay. You can get this data and then you can use it to display a number of circles, or you can use it to do some calculation. How this data ends up being used on the subscriber end is no concern to the publisher, which is also really cool. If in our scenario we have someone who publishes and it's just responsible for storing and managing email data, it doesn't really care whether this data will become a list of email titles, a UI which shows the whole email, a sidebar or like a footer that says that shows the total messages or the unread messages or the start. All this guy is really interested is seeing who has subscribed to it and send the data, notify them of the data when that changes. So this makes it really flexible. We can grab the data and use it in our application anywhere we want in any way we like. So let me see the questions. Okay, so let me copy this, and see how we can make this, turn this into a different. So let me, okay, I have to. Oops, delete a couple of things here. Okay, we have our application, and let me reintroduce this guy here. Right now, we're not afraid of introducing more widgets and uh, trying out stuff. As you will see, it's going to be a lot simpler than before. So we have these components. So the first thing is to first of all know what kind of data that you are going to be working with. In our case, the email server deals with one specific entity, which is the email. Okay, so we have kind of like an email. This is the type of data that this server, or as we will see in a bit, it will become a publisher, and it's going to be storing and managing this type of data, email. Of course, in a real life scenario, we will have like users on an email server. We will have, I don't know, maybe some other entities as well. And then the email will contain the title, body, an unread status, and then the sender, an ID, a unique ID for its email, and then maybe the date that was sent, or yeah. So we have this, we have to think carefully about the kind of data that we're going to be using and publishing, and also the schema, as it's called, the structure of this data. So this is the email, and then we have to just let all these guys subscribe to this guy here, and maybe we can turn this into a single component. So instead of like email, maybe we'll create an email list component that is responsible for iterating through the emails. So maybe we can simplify even more by introducing one single component that contains the logic of looping and displaying these email messages. And then we have the viewer, and then we have like this guy here, and then we have this guy here. So we still have connections. These connections are just one-time thing. This is the subscribe. All these components run a function, and they say to the email server, hey, whenever something changes, please notify me because I need to change something on the view. So the first thing is to subscribe. So this is the subscribe. And then the journey starts, and every time there's a new email. So if we have, let's say, 2 new emails coming into the server from some user, of course the data changes. The server was holding 0 emails for this particular user. It now contains 2 new emails, so the data changes from an empty array into an array of 2 emails. And now the email server will check the list of subscribers. So the next step would be to publish. So the publisher will see that it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 subscribers, and it will take these 2 emails and then send them, notify these uh, components that, hey, you have some new data, see what you can do with it. Once again, it doesn't really care what each of these components will do with the data. It's not the responsibility of the email server or the publisher to, format the data or, I don't know, do something. It's up to each component to decide what it wants to do with the data. For example, the inbox will not show the email title or body or sender. It only is concerned with the number of unread properties. So this will take the data and it will pick the number of unread messages and show the number 1, 2, whatever. This one is interested for the title, the unread, because it wants to show you the unread status in here with red. Maybe the start. We'll see. Maybe we need to put a start. Okay, and that's it. It doesn't really care about the sender, the body, or maybe the date. Okay, and all the other components, of course, use the data that they get from the publisher in some way or another. So now that our system is connected with in this way, it is relatively easy, or at least a lot more easier, to introduce a new feature without having to worry about any interconnections. If I have like if I didn't have like the start widget, introducing a new feature on the app, which is a nice, I don't know, thing here that says, show me the number of start messages. The only thing I have to think about is create the UI component, subscribe to the email server, and then get a notification. I don't have to think about all the other parts of my system. And this is how the observer pattern makes it easy to deal with complex systems. You don't have to think about all the other components, and you don't have to think about their interconnection. It's much, much easier to introduce a component, subscribe, manage what this component is going to do with the data, and then even if this whole thing goes away, you don't really care. This is still a subscriber. It's going to get the data and it's going to show start 1. You can delete all the rest of the components without worrying about interconnections. These connections, these subscribers will either automatically unsubscribe. For example, in React, they automatically unsubscribe. But in other systems, we have an explicit command that you need to run. You have to run a command unsubscribe so that you can manually let some component unsubscribe and thus not get any future notifications. Okay, and it makes it easy to work with such systems. And of course, meaning that that the component can unsubscribe doesn't mean that you will need to get rid of it. Maybe the component just doesn't need to get notified. Maybe it works, without having to re-render some data. Okay, but in this case, all of our components rely on some data from the publisher. So this is how we went from kind of like normal approach. So your intuition will probably lead you to something like this. If you haven't worked with software patterns or you haven't worked with such a system like this, eventually you will get yourself into trouble with dealing with all these interconnected components. And probably you will come across a pattern or a solution, or maybe you will devise your own solution that it's maybe similar to the observer pattern, and you will get to something like this. Which is more scalable, it's safer, it's very easy, or at least a lot more easier to introduce or new features or discard old features or old components. And the combination of things and connections that you have to think about whenever you make a change will be reduced to just a few instead of all this exponential growth that we saw in the other system. Um, so this is the end of the conceptual part. This is like the theory, and now we're going to go and actually try to build a simple email client and implement this uh, into our code. I'm also going to send you the link, so you can refresh. Now this won't be auto refreshed, so you have to refresh. I will save. The code will be saved, and then if you want to check the code on your computer, you will have to press reload to see the updated code. So let me start by building a very simple setup. So I will have like a section where all my email client will be placed. I will have a header. Let me see. I had this earlier. Okay. So I will create an aside element which is going to hold the inbox, and then I'm going to have like a main which is going to be holding the list of messages. So this is going to be an unordered list of, let's say, 4 emails. We'll be styling this in a bit. And then we'll make it look a little bit like, so the inbox, the number of unread messages, another section that will be showing the list. And then I had here, let me see, and then I had like a div called message, let's see, which is going to be showing the title and the content of the currently selected content here. So I have these components. Let me just do some very basic styling. So first, let me um, put some outline to see their. Okay, so I have these 3 boxes, but what I really want is the inbox to go here, and then these guys to go here. So I want something like inbox 2, and then the list of messages here, and then an area where the main email will be shown. Also, later on, I will share some code pens that you can use to actually practice and move all this code into a real looking email client. So I have some really cool Gmail clones where you can try working because they look really cool. So I want to build something that the inbox is on the left. I will not be putting any compose or other buttons, the list of messages, and at the bottom here, I will just load and show the current message. So in order to do this, in order to put this guy on the left and this thing here, so these 2 guys here and this guy here, and put them aside, I will need to target their container element, the section, and use the display flex. So I'm going to say section display flex. Let me see if I'm. So now we have the flexbox works by smashing them, let's say, next to each other. I want to give my aside some kind of width, like let's say 40% of the total width. And then I want the main section. So let me put also some outline around the main. So I also want this to take the rest of the space. So 30% for this guy, and then the rest will be either 70%, or with Flexbox, I can say grow as much as you have space. So FlexGrow says take all the available space. Um, and I won't be going into any further CSS. I'm just going to comment the outline for now. Or maybe, okay, maybe I'll keep this just to see these areas like this. And just to make this a little bit nicer, I'm going to add water. So I'm going to go to water CSS, which is a nice way to add a styling to your HTML without having to worry about classes and libraries. So just by adding this link, I will have like a nicer, let's say, kind of like looking. Okay, so enough with CSS. We have our inbox, and this is going to be a subscriber, right? Because it needs to update whenever there's a new unread or read message. So to change the number, so we have one component that needs to subscribe. We have the list. We definitely need this to subscribe to some kind of like a publisher to display new messages or other messages as well. And then we have, of course, the message, the viewer. So these three components will have to subscribe to the publisher and get notified and update their screen or the UI whenever we have the new data update. Last thing before I want to introduce like the here I'm going to say that if this is unread, I'm going to be showing a slightly different styling. So if the message is unread, usually you see it in strong bold letters. And then maybe I will put a span here that would say unread or something like that, just to keep it a bit more friendly and accessible, because someone who cannot see will have no clue about whether this is unread or read. So we need to have this for a screen reader, for example. So here's the idea. We need some kind of publisher, some kind of like email data manager to notify these three components. So we'll have something like an application. I will call it an app or email app or whatever, and they will be subscribing to the app. And whenever there's a new message or whenever a message gets like changes the status, or maybe whenever, I don't know, we can even delete messages, the publisher will be notifying these sections here accordingly, so that this turns into 3 or 1. This turns into like a normal text without the unread. And this, of course, will change. And when we click on this message, this will be showing the message A. When we click on this one, we will see and reading the message B, and so forth. So this is the rough idea. Our publisher, our 3 subscribers, and then we'll have to deal with kind of like rendering the UI. So I will start with a basic part. Okay, so for this application, I'm going to be using a class just to organize our code in a nice manner. I will clear the console on the automatic refresh of CodePen so that we don't see the previous messages. So I'm going to be introducing a class that we will instantiate, and it will contain the application code and functionality. So I'm going to create an app, and then I'm going to instantiate it with the new keyword, of course, to have a new object, which is going to contain our application. So this is going to be our boilerplate. This is going to be our blueprint class, and then we will get a new app object. In this way, we can also reuse the app class and introduce a new app. So we can create 2 or more instances of an app, and maybe we can use it on the same page or another part of the website. Okay, so we have 2 things that we have to take care. We have to take care of the data, okay, and we have to take of the pub sub pattern. So one part would be about the data that will be actually stored in our application. And then the pub sub is going to be this pub subscriber model or pattern. So this is going to be about the communication between the app and the publisher and the three subscribers. So I mentioned earlier that we have to think about the structure of our entities. We only have one entity, one thing that is going to be in our data. That's the email, and I'm going to be just describing the properties here. I think that's all we need. And of course, we will need some kind of a container inside our app to hold this email. So I'm going to be using private properties. There's a new feature in JavaScript where you can create properties. You can define properties in the class with a hash symbol. And this means that this is a property of the, let me just, someone wants to join. So we have a property, and we can access it outside of the app. If it's not private, we can say console log app messages, and we will see an empty array here in the console, or something like an array. But if we want to keep this property private, if we don't want to expose it to the outside world, if this is something internal, we can use a private property. So we keep it protected. And in this case, we no longer can access these private variables from outside the app. So I will keep the messages private, and I will expose them using some kind of an API. I will expose them using the publisher, but not directly as a property, because I don't want the user to accidentally do something like this, okay, by mistake, like empty the array or change it to another value. So I'm going to keep it simple. So that's the messages. Then, so this is the data. We will create some data CRUD operations. So if you remember, CRUD stands for create, read, update, and delete. So when you have data in your application, you normally use these four operations. You create data, you read the data, you update, and then you delete. So for this data, we have to create some kind of commands that are going to be creating messages, reading messages, updating the messages, or deleting the messages. In our case, the R is not needed because the reading part will be managed by the publisher. The publisher is going to notify the subscribers, and they will be reading the data. But for changing the data, like creating or updating, we need some kind of like methods to allow us to, for example, create new messages. So I will create a simple method called add message that is going to be introducing a new message to our data storage. So this is not private because I want it available outside of the class because I want some kind of like a fetch request or some kind of server connection to grab the data and then put it inside the app. So this, as you can see, produces no errors. And now I need to grab the message, and then I'm going to push it. I'm going to access the private variable and push that message into the messages array. So we're inside the class, so we access all the properties and methods through the this keyword, the dot notation for object access, or method access. And whenever there's a private variable, we have, of course, to use the full hash name. So this is for accessing private properties. And if you had a public property like, I don't know, whatever, we would, of course, use this whatever. So the only thing that makes a property or method private is this hash at the beginning of the name. So let me get rid. So this is a simple method to add some methods to the data storage. This of course would be like fetch request to a email server, get the messages, and then store them. In our example, we will just be introducing some kind of like mock data. So title, email A, body would be body A. Unread, it's going to be true. A new message is always in true mode. And then let me also introduce another message. And let me introduce, okay, for some reason, maybe we had the server storing old messages. I will have a message that the user has already read. So this will be false. Now, if I were to access this array, after line 22, I would see an array of like 3 messages. Let me console log the state of our app just to see this happening as we add or append messages to our. So we have our first message in the array on line 21. Then we append another one. Then we append the third one. And after line 23, the console log shows the 3 messages. So everything works as expected. We're good to go. Now we will be introducing some other methods. We'll see whether we have time. So we need to add a message. We need to mark message as read. So we need a method to pick a message and switch it from unread status into read. And for this one, we need, of course, to pass some kind of argument. Which message do we want like to mark as read? And probably the best way is to provide an ID. Okay, and I think this is pretty simple. So I'm going to implement this. So when we call this method, let's call it right here. Let me also once again these messages. So before I add the third message, I'm going to switch this messages mode into false. So I'm going to turn the message with ID 2 into a read. So I'm going to say app mark message as read. Okay, and let's see whether right now it's still true. So this guy is going to be using the ID. It's going to be searching through the messages array to find the message with the ID 2 or whatever ID we pass. So we have message search through the loop through the messages and find the message that has an ID which equals the one that we passed through the argument. So take an argument 2, loop through, this is like a looping method, loop through the messages, and then return true, so return back the element if that element's ID, that's the message inside the array, is equal with the ID that we just passed. So compare 2 with all the messages in our array, and when we find that message, give it back to us. So pick, this is like pick the right message based, and then change its status. So now that we have the message, let me see whether we have correctly picked our message. And I believe the find will stop. Whenever it finds the message, it will stop. It will not iterate through the whole list. I'm not sure. We should check MDN. So it stops when it finds, but we have to double check. So I have my message, and all I have to do now is methods unread equals to false. So we mark it as. So let's see whether this works. We should be seeing email with ID 2 as false. Yes. So a create operation to add the methods. Let me just console remove this. Very simple. An update operation which just marks a message as read, and we can see delete methods, something that we'll need. And so add methods, mark methods here, delete method. What else we can think of? You can implement this. So we go now from this is the simple like data management part of our app. Okay, now it's up to the pub sub pattern. So pay close attention because this is really important. So what is the pub sub pattern? It needs to store a list of subscribers, right? That's important. So we need subscribers list. Then we need a method to let different components or different, I don't know, things, we'll see what these things are, to subscribe. So we also need a subscribe pattern. Okay, so hold the subscribers, and then this guy is going to add subscribers. Okay, so that we can say add, app, subscribe, and not some kind of thing. We'll see what kind of thing will subscribe. Okay, we will not pass a string. So, and then also subscribe. So this should be like the inbox. This should be the email list. And then there should be a third subscriber, which is the email, I guess, viewer, right? Now this won't do anything because it's a simple string, but we'll see. I'm going to save so you can see the code. I'm sharing the code again. So if you joined, you can take a look at the code live. Okay, so how do we subscribe? Well, this is actually pretty simple. We just push subscriber. So we pass something to the function, and then we push it to the array of subscribers. Really, really simple. Okay, so we pass a string, another string, and then we get, I will create a kind of like a debug method here to show the, this is going to be a public method just to let us debug the, like the state, which should be private. Okay, so I will have to remove it once we go into production. So we have, okay, I think, okay, not these messages, these subscribers. Going to be doing this mistake a lot. Okay, so let me close this. Okay, we subscribed once. We have a new subscriber, the email list. We subscribe another thing. And then we subscribe a third thing. Okay, now here's the idea. We have like this, let's say, we have the first part of the pub sub, we have the publisher, and these guys are connected. Okay, they have subscribed. Now, the other important part is that when we have some kind of like new data, for example, we have new 3 new messages, we need to notify these things, and they will have to do something. They have to act. So this subscriber here these three subscribers have the following responsibility. They get the state of the app, the data. In our case, it's just the messages, and they must re-render the part of the UI that shows this thing, this thing, and this thing. Okay, so the subscriber should be something that accepts an input, the state, and outputs and does some work. So what's the ideal thing? What's the ideal candidate for a thing that accepts input and does some work? Well, a function. So subscribers are just going to be functions. They're going to be called. They're going to be passed the state, um, the publisher's data, and then they're going to be doing some work. And that work, as mentioned earlier, is irrelevant or is something that the publisher should ignore. What its function will do with the data is up to the function. The publisher just needs to send the data. So a good candidate for subscriber, at least in the programming context, is a function, which means I have to create a function called render email list. So I will convert these strings into functions, inbox, and then function render email viewer. Okay. Function that accepts an input. The input is going to be the same in all cases. A state, basically all the data that the publisher will publish, will send. For some of these functions, all of the parts of the state will be of interest. For others, only a part of it will be really used. For example, the inbox only needs to know, let's say, the unread part of the messages. The email viewer just needs to know one message. The email list will need to know just the title of every message. So each subscriber can do whatever they want with the data. So instead of now subscribing a simple string, which makes no sense, I'm going to subscribing a function. And as you can see, this is a function reference. This is not a function call. I'm just sending this function reference to the publisher. It's not my responsibility to call this function. The publisher will call this function whenever the data updates. So I'm not calling the function here. So I'm passing a reference of these three functions to the guy over here, which you can see in the subscribers array through the debug method here. So we have our first subscriber. This is the empty function. We have the second subscriber, and we have the third subscriber. Okay, so now the publisher holds a list of the subscribers. Let me close this debug for now. Okay, now just to see something happening after, let's say, the subscription, I'm going to be moving all these add messages. I'm going to be keeping this as unread. So I'm going to subscribe so that we start with some empty data, some empty messages, and then I'm going to start adding some data to the app, so that the app notifies and publishes this data to the three subscribers. So after line 47, what must happen here is that the app should notify the subscribers that a message was added, another message was added, and yet another message was added 3 times. Okay, so every time the data changes, we need to notify the subscribers. Now, maybe a more optimized version of this would be to, instead of adding a message and then notifying the subscribers 3 times, we can also create a method that I will leave it up to you, which is going to be supplying an array of messages. So change the data just once with 3 emails and notify the subscribers 1 time. So we're reducing the number of notifications and the number of ups and downs of the data and rendering by optimizing this introduction, this creation of email messages. At this point, I'm just going to keep it simple and uh, maybe a little bit unoptimized to add 3 messages, one after the other. So we're expecting the publisher to publish 3 times, right? First message, second message, third message. Which means that we need to create a publish function. So publish is going to be a private method. I don't want someone outside of the app to publish. This is the publisher's responsibility. Nobody else should be able to do this. And what do we need here? We need to notify all the subscribers. What does it mean to notify? In our case, since the subscribers are functions, that means call all subscriber functions. So the notification is all about running these functions, okay? So they do some work. The subscribers are just workers. We call them with some data and they do some work. So I'm just going to be introducing a very simple publish method. So go through all the subscribers, and then for each one of them, just call the function. That's it. Iterate for all the subscribers and call them, which means that all these 3 functions will be called, let's call them just once, okay? Let's just change the data once. So they will be called this guy and console log this guy. All of them should be notified, so we should see all 3 logs. Let's see if I made this work. Oops. Okay, let's wait for the auto refresh. Let me save. Nothing happens. Well, it makes sense because I never published. Okay, I defined the publish method, but I never published. So when do we publish? When does the publisher decides to publish? Whenever the data changes. In our application, when does our data change? It changes when we add the message. So this is the right time to publish whenever we change the data. So change the data or state and then publish. Or if you know something about another library, that would be React. If you were using React, this is the time for React to react. So update the state and re-render. So this is just calling the publish. So now we call the add message, we update the state, and we see the 3 subscribers executing. Where else does the data or the state changes? It changes over here. So change its status, publish. So you have to find the places in your app where you change your state, and after your state has changed, you should publish. Okay, so that's the rule. Let me put it here. Rule. Publish. In React, when the state updates, the React framework will react and it will re-render the component. So this is very close to the React architecture and the React philosophy. So we have, let me know if you have any questions. I will stop and go back, so feel free. We have the publish working. So we have each subscriber. Now let's see what is inside the first parameter of these subscribers. Undefined. Of course, it makes sense, undefined, because this is empty. When we iterate through the list of subscribers and call them, we supply no argument. So this is undefined, and thus we get undefined here. But the responsibility of the workers, of the subscribers, is to actually get some kind of data, the state of the app, and do some work with the data, like re-render the UI. So instead of just passing undefined, I can pass a state of the app. In my case, that would be messages. So let's see whether now each subscriber gets called and they can work with the state. This guy can render now the email list because it has all the emails. This guy here can display number because it has one unread messages. So it can calculate in your processed information. It can calculate the number of unread messages. It would be one, of course, in this case. And the email viewer can do something with these emails. We'll see now. This needs some kind of like an extra information in order to display the email, because if this guy gets like three messages, which one is it going to display? So we need to provide some kind of hint to this third subscriber that, hey, we want you to display only one particular email. And of course, that would be the one that the user clicked. Actually, let me make this clickable. So, oh, well, clickable. Cursor pointer, so that at least the user knows that they can click. And maybe let's make this hover, and then I don't know, like opacity. I don't know if this works, but at least we'll see some kind of like effect. Okay, so I can pass the state and I can let this guy here, for example, read the state and calculate the number of unread messages. But in order for our state to be scalable and to be able to add more things, because messages is one thing, but maybe another point, we might need to introduce another part of our data storage here. Another thing that I'm thinking of is currently selected methods. So another data property that we can introduce is the methods that we have currently selected to be displayed. Okay, and this can be either null, none is selected, or it can be an ID or maybe a message object. So this is another part of our state that can be used to let this subscriber display only this particular message. And so in order to make this more scalable, instead of just passing the messages to the subscriber, we will just pass an object that contains the whole state. So I'm going to say an object. Actually, let me make this a little bit. Let me make this cleaner. So first, let me create the state. And then we have, okay, this, I will say current for now, just to cut this short, but you shouldn't be doing this in your editor because I don't have auto complete. That's why I'm a little bit lazy, but you should make this fully self-descriptive. So now my state is an object that contains properties that contain all the different parts of our data, the messages, the current, and maybe, I don't know, something extra next time. And then we pass it to the subscribers. So each of them gets from undefined into messages, current, and whatever they need. So let me save. Take a look at the code. If you have any questions, please post them on the chat. I will give you 1 minute to read the code. Please go read the code and let me know if you have any questions. I'm going to be uncommenting 2 more lines so that we add 3 messages and we get something more fancy, let's say, to view in our user interface. Okay. And then I'm, I'm debugging. Okay, I'm debugging. No, sorry. Okay, I'll start by focusing on the inbox. So we have a subscriber which is called inbox. It gets notified. We can see here through the console. Let me comment the other subscriber so we don't see. And in the last notification, because it's going to be notified 3 times, we will see a list of all the messages and currently set to null. So at this point, we have to think about what this subscriber's work is all about. So the render inbox is responsible for getting the state, reading the messages, so reading all the messages, and counting the total unread messages. So that's one responsibility. The other is to re-render the inbox UI. So first, do something with the data, grab the state, grab the messages from the state, iterate, find the total unread messages, the ones that have the property unread set to true, and then when it has this data, so basically a number, in our case it's two are the unread messages, then go into the DOM and render this part of our application. So first, let's complete the total count. Well, this is relatively simple. We just iterate. Oops, I'm not inside the app. So state messages, filter, and then filter just the messages that have. So I'm grabbing the state from the parameter, going through the state.messages to actually access the messages property of the state, because we also have the current, loop over these three objects and filter just to get the messages that have their property set to unread. Or if it doesn't make too much sense, you can say something that like this. Okay, but it's actually the same thing. Um, so this will come out with just two messages, or an array to be exact of two messages. So if we get the length of the array, we will get the number 2. Okay, so we save this in a variable and we try to console log it to see whether we get the correct number. So we should be getting 2. And as you can see, we have 3 notifications. Okay, the first time we have 1 unread, it's the first message. Then we add another message, so it iterates through the whole list of messages. This time there are 2 messages, and 2 of them have true, so we get 2. The third time it gets notified, we have 3 messages in our state, but 2 of them have the value set to true, so we get 2 at the last notification. So we get this recurring, like as I said, notification. We can optimize and have like 3 messages appended at the same time. It's okay for now. We will re-render 3 times. No big deal. So now I just to dynamically create this part. So I will go here. I will remove this, and I will say now it's up to you to pick the aside element from the HTML and just display the num of unread. So I'm replacing the static content with the dynamic value. Picking the element, finding the element aside in the DOM. You should be doing this. You should be saying this something like using an ID. Horrible practices here. So get by ID, inbox. And then, of course, we have to test what happens if I comment this guy and this guy. I get 1, correct. I uncomment the second one, two renders, but at the end we get the last render showing 2, and then this one is going to be again 2. If I turn this into true, we should be seeing 3. Okay, so false. So we have our first success in creating and implementing a pub sub pattern. So we have just created our first pub sub. So we have a pub sub, a publisher. This is the app. Okay, somewhere hidden inside the app, we have the messages. We have these guys subscribed. Then we do some kind of like data entry. So we add some messages. So this can be done in so many ways. A server can update the publisher, maybe an interaction by the user, maybe an event. This can be done in so many ways. So we change the data, and then we have our publisher notify all these components. And these remain the same because we have not implemented any work on these two more subscribers. But this one, we saw that we got 1, 2, 3, whatever. So this now is a dynamic element that listens for notifications from the publisher. And whenever the publisher updates, we see this getting updated. So this is pretty cool. And as you can see in just a few lines of code, like basically the pub sub is this, like literally like 4 lines. This is the whole essence of pub sub. A list of subscribers, a way to add subscribers, and a way to publish, which means to call all the subscriber functions whenever something changes. So basically, this is a nice pattern. It's tightly packed into very few lines of code. Of course, if you want to build this for production, you want to introduce a lot of other options. For example, in here, we want to return an unsubscribe function. So usually what you see is when you subscribe, you give the subscriber the option to unsubscribe. So you create a function called unsubscribe, and your challenge will be to unsubscribe this subscriber. So you return a function, not going to implement this. This is your challenge. Whenever you subscribe, you also get an extra tool. You get an unsubscribe function. So every time you subscribe, you get an email list, or let me, okay, unsubscribe email list, const inbox unsubscribe inbox, and then const email unsubscribe email viewer. So this subscribe function now not only subscribes you, so it adds the function to the list, but it returns back a value. This is a function, so it returns back a value, and you end up with a function over here, which means that you can call this and unsubscribe. Okay, so if we want at some point to unsubscribe, let's say the email unsubscribe email list view, we just call this function. Right now the function does nothing, but what would happen is that we start with 3 subscribers. Okay, and then at some point this guy here decides to unsubscribe by calling this function. So at this point, this would be like destroyed. the subscription gets cut off. So the publisher no longer cares about this subscriber. So the next time it publishes, it will just be to this guy and this guy. This guy no longer needs to read for state changes. So the challenge that you need to implement is to fill in the code in the subscribe unsubscribe function so that you can unsubscribe any subscriber at any point. That's something that we find in a lot of PubSub implementations. It's really useful because we might want at some point to stop getting notifications or stop rendering or maybe hide an element and then show it again and so forth. So you get the idea. Now, let me see, we have just a few minutes, so let's implement like the second subscriber, and I will leave the email viewer to you. So this is your challenge. So receive the state and then render the current email. Okay, so I will leave this up to you. We will now render the list. So once again, what are the two steps of the subscriber? Get the data, get the part of the state basically that we're interested in, do something with that data, and render that data into the DOM. So in this case, we have like we have the list. So I'm going to be grabbing this one. So now hiding this static content. And we have the class list. So I'm going to be needing this element in order to append the and then, of course, always start with pseudocode, or always start with how you think we should proceed with the code. Don't just start writing commands. So iterate over the list of messages. For every message, render the following, let's say, structure markup. So that's the responsibility of this subscriber. So once again, the iteration is really simple. You have state, you have messages, and you have for each. It's an array. So we can like console log the message. Yep, we have our messages here. And now we need this to go here, which means that we can either like do something concatenate or append something like this as a string to the inner HTML of the list. And you get the messages, but you will see we have a problem. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, that's because we get 3 notifications. So this function gets rendered 3 times. So we have 3 state updates. We get 3 function calls. So for every function call, we append. One thing that we can do is before every re-render or before every execution of the render email list, we can say list clear the inner HTML. So you just re-render, clear the contents, and then append the contents again. And then, of course, you can say here, instead of just hard coding a value, each message contains title, unread, and that's all we need for this one. So whether it's read or unread status and the title. So we will replace this with nice backticks here. The message title will be here. And then I'm going to just, let me just break this up. And then I'm going to say list inner HTML. Just close this. So the first part, the second part, and in here I'm just going to introduce a conditional. So if the message is unread, in that case, only append this thing here, which is going to be, let me put this here, is going to be just this part. Strong span. Okay, why do I see this on the second line? Span. Okay, I wasn't expecting to see this. I'm doing something wrong, obviously. Let me see some of your questions. So app should get the current managed ID from the message list. I become a subscriber. So basically, I'm not sure about which function. Like if we're talking about the, not sure. Can you elaborate on the question? Like when exactly do you want the this to happen to become a subscriber? Um, so the idea was like when we want to select a message here by clicking, we want this thing to change to the currently selected ID. So upon selection, this will become a number ID. So this will become either 1, 2, or 3. We have 3 messages. And then this ID will be used to render this guy over here. So if we want to render the email viewer part, we'll have to check the current ID. If it's null, we just do nothing. If it's 1, we iterate through the list of messages, find once again with the find method the message based on the current ID, and then take this data and render it right here. If that's what you imply or your question is about, I hope this helps. But you'll have plenty of time to like experiment and try these things out. Now I will keep this here like this. I'm not sure why I get like an extra new line here. Strong. I'm closing. This is a span. This is an inline element, so I'm not sure whether li. It's a list. Okay. Okay, I'm appending to the list. So now I get it. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say I'm going to start appending to a simple string. I'm appending to the list. That's why it's. So first, I'm first going to create like a string, a simple string, and then at the end, I'm going to append it to the list. So my mistake was that was appending to the UL list instead of just the li. So I'm crafting the markup in the form of a string, and then at the end, once I have my final markup in the form of a string, either with or without the span, then I append to the list. So this is the UL, and this is the. Now the problem with this one, I want to finish with this one because it's going to be you're going to be needing this to try this out. Now the problem with this is that if we create this sort of like markup with strings, it's pretty nice. It's like working with HTML and then some dynamic values. But the biggest problem is with event handlers. So we want this to be clickable, which means we want the add event listener. Now you can append this markup to the list and then find these elements using like document query selector and then use add event listener. So, but that is going to turn out to be a little bit difficult. So this method of using simple strings and inner HTML to append HTML to your markup dynamically is really nice and handy when you don't need to attach or add event listeners. So this will probably work if we just want to display, let's say, the methods. But if we want some action to happen, simple string, let's say dynamic rendering. This is using strings to put things together and then append them to the inner HTML property. But this is going to be really hard for us to actually introduce an event listener. So I will use the second more powerful method, which is object dynamic rendering. So instead of using strings, I'm going to be using objects. So I'm going to create an li using the document create element. So I'm now handling objects, not strings. Li now is an object, much more powerful than a simple string. I'm going to say li inner HTML equals, then let me see, I'm going to be appending this. And then, so let me do the same thing here. So let me put this here. So li, and then at the end, I'm going to say li, oops, not, this is, let's say, li, let's say, inner. So once again, create the string, but this time, the main element, the li, which is going to be clickable, it's not a string, it's an object. So I'm going to say inner HTML equals li-inner, not best name. And then append this to the list. So append child. Another method, not inner HTML, because now I'm working with objects. So object creation here, and object appending here. Something here is happening that's introducing an extra element. Let's see if I can find it quickly. Otherwise, okay, I'm adding this extra li. So I don't need this, okay? Okay. And let me put some space here. So now, why did I use an object and then append it as an object instead of using just this or this? Because if I have an object, I can say li add event listener click. And then I can say something like read this email. And then what do I need to do? So I want to, let's say, console log reading email with ID. I have the ID already, which is, I'm inside the loop, so I have methods.id. So now I can click on these guys here, and I can get their ID. It's going to be very hard for me to do this thing, to add an event listener if I'm using plain strings, okay? So work with objects, they're much more powerful, and they allow you to add an event listener or all these three li objects. You can use event delegation to actually optimize this and have just one click handler for all the messages. That's a little bit more advanced, but for now we have the ID. So to conclude, and I will leave you to implement the rest of the steps, is you need to get this ID, notify the app that the currently selected message is the one that I just clicked. So let me start with an empty viewer. Okay. We will click this one. We will see email A here. We will click this one. We will see email B here. We click this one. We'll see email C and so forth. So this is a dynamic. So in this in this part, the click needs to set the currently selected or viewable email. Remember, we had introduced a method in our app called, no, we hadn't. So let me select methods. This will set the current to ID. So this is going to like set the this current variable into a number, and because this is changing the state, I'm going to publish again. So remember the rule: change the state, publish. So this function, when it's called, is going to update the current private property into a number, 1, 2, 3, and then um, it's going to select methods ID. So now let me see if this works. Let me console log this guy here. So subscribe, please. Okay. So I click this one. I get the ID. I call the app select methods. So the app knows that the publisher knows that the current is changed from 1 to 2, from 2 to 3, from 3 to 1, or from null to 1, and it publishes. So the state changes, the current becomes from null 2, or from 2, 3, state up change, re-render, or publish. So when it publishes, then we say this guy here changes the state. Okay, so state change, notify this guy here, which is like right now it's a little bit it's invisible. It's the HTML, and this guy should show the email A. Okay, so click here, change the state, current becomes 1, then show the first email. Click here, change the state to 2, notify this guy so that they re-render. And last thing, just console log to see that it's working. So the email viewer will have to see the current, right? So let's see. Now, if I click this guy is going to add the ID to the current property of the app. The app, since it changes state, is going to publish, and this guy here, so this function here that's about to render this component, will read the state, the current, and try to do some work so that it renders the specific email. So you can see now it has the ID 2, 2. So we're passing the ID from here to here. Let me make this. So this is the message. Let me make this, I don't know. Height. Let's just show it. Or minimum height. So it expands. Okay. So now your challenge is to take this and try to see what you can do with the state. Remember, the responsibility of the subscriber is to get the state, do some kind of processing, come up with a state that it needs in order to render the UI component that is responsible for in the DOM. So you have the current, you have the whole state, do something, and then with the data display the email. So that's your challenge here. Then another challenge is, of course, to mark its email as read. So I leave this up to you to find a way to either click here or click here. I would say a button mark as unread here would be nice to have something like okay, we don't have any styling, but have some kind of like a small button here, and then click it, and then this will be coming email A, no unread, no more, and then this will become obsolete. So hide this or turn this into mark as read, and turn this into a different status. Some emails just sets the email to read. That's it. Others let you toggle between read and unread if you really want to come back to this email again. I think this toggler is much more realistic. We need this toggling instead of just one-time things. And that's it for today. Um, so I'm going to do a very quick recap, then some questions, and we'll wrap up. So we have an application that contains 3 UI elements. We want to have a data storage, and we want that data storage to update, and then whenever it updates, to notify each of these 3 subscribers and let them do their work and do something, change something only on a particular part of the user interface. Right now, it's very easy for you to add another component that's going to listen to changes from the state. It's very easy for you to remove a component, and it's very easy for you to focus on a particular UI component and change everything you like. You don't have to think about anything else on the app. It's as easy as picking a part from an automobile and changing with something else. You don't have to think about all the other parts. That's the beautiful part about the observer pattern. We saw that the main idea is really just a few lines of code. So PubSub is that's this thing. Keep a list of subscribers, subscribe, so add these functions. We use functions as subscribers to our list. And whenever we publish, we just go through all these subscribers, call them, pass them the state, and that's it. So it's pretty small in as a very basic. So I hope you like it. Work on the challenges and share your code. So thank you.